Alright, so I figured now that I'm on some 2-lane roads in upstate New York, and I do a little video, pretty little upstate New York. I just crossed at Lake Champlain, so I gotta go through a couple small towns, make a couple of questionable corners, and get back on the interstate, go like 2 exits down, and there's my delivery. It's funny, this delivery is just barely into the States, and I just run across Canada the whole time, which is worse than what it could be. I'm very late for my delivery. I was supposed to deliver 11 p.m. last night, but I ran out of hours on my log, and there was just no way I was going to make it. I got caught in a lot of traffic. One of the problems with this load is I got to go all the way out to the east end or the west end of the province, then go all the way to the east end of the province into Quebec, but the only way to get there is to go through Toronto. And Toronto at almost all hours is a nightmare, but I had the choice between going through Toronto at fucking 6 in the morning and dealing with morning rush hour, or 4 in the afternoon and dealing with evening rush hour. By the time I was loaded, it was 3 o'clock in the morning and I was going to bed. So I got it into Toronto. The highway was shut down at one point, so I had to go to downtown Kitchener, Ontario to get around the accident, which ate up about 2 hours. Because downtown Kitchener is all under construction, so I didn't go any fucking faster. Then I got held up in the city just because the traffic was so slow. It took me like 6.5 hours to do, which should have only been like 2 hours, maybe 3 hours worth of driving. So Toronto's like Atlanta at this point. It's just, the only difference is Atlanta, there's ways around it. Toronto, there isn't. And it's difficult to explain to Americans. It's as though, to go east and south, or north and south through, New York State, you had to take a highway that went right through the middle of New York City. And the only other ways around it were like 2-lane country roads that may or may not be truck legal. Like when south of Toronto is Lake Ontario, so obviously I'm not going there. Okay, like a year, thank you. North of Toronto is just 2-lane roads. Like there's a couple of highways that are toll roads, but I can't actually legally drive on them unless I have a transponder. Doesn't matter whether I pay the toll with cash or whatever, I have to have a transponder. So, you're forced to go down the 401, and the 401 is fucking anarchy. Like, it is a massive shit show. So I wasted so much time. So I was only like, it wasn't even fucking noon yet, and I'd already called dispatch, like, yeah, cancel my appointment, change it around, because I'm not going to make it. Like, really? And I said, yeah, why not? Well, I'm 7 hours away, and I got 5 hours and 40 minutes of drive time left. I ain't fucking getting there. Well, how'd that happen? Well, traffic. The problem with traffic is that traffic becomes it's almost like my dog ate my homework. Like, again, they look, well, and everybody blames everything on traffic. Every time some truck driver does something stupid, he blames it on traffic, and it's like, well, it's not the case, right? I legitimately got hung up in traffic. The problem was they wanted me there for 8 o'clock this morning, which hasn't happened either, because I couldn't legally start until 8 a.m. Because same thing, the traffic typically, by the time you get to the east end of Toronto, like Whitby, not even Whitby, you're out of the traffic. I had traffic out past Oshawa, which is like an hour and a half past Toronto. Not quite that well. It felt like it was an hour and a half for me, anyways. That's well past the point where you're normally encountering traffic, and I was still like stuck in bumper to bumper traffic. Like I was blown away. Like I was losing my shit yesterday at how fucking bad it was. So like I said, I got to the Quebec border and had to shut down. So that put me at 2 hours and 50 minutes away. And I shut down at pretty much 10 o'clock exactly. So that meant that I was not starting my day till 8 a.m. So I'll get there about 11ish. I want to say I'm less than an hour away now, so I figure 11 o'clock. But of course, again, the dispatch, that doesn't make any sense, Dan. It's only like a 9-hour drive from your shipper to your receiver. It's like, yeah, it's 9 hours on a good day. which doesn't exist. Like that's kind of a key point to make too, is that when you're going through Toronto, like there is, like they say, there's no such thing as rush hour in Toronto anymore. It is always busy all of the time. You know, it's a major city on the scale of New York or LA. Like that's what you're going through. So it's just borderline impossible to get through there. So you kind of just, I don't know, hope for the best. Like unless you say you go through there like 1 or 2 in the morning, it'll be quieter. It'll still be busy, but you likely will be able to do highway speed. But any time before midnight or after about 3 a.m., you're fucked. So again, it's just absolute fucking retardation. That's Canada right in front of you too, by the way. This fucking couple of poles and stuff that might show up are literally the border. It's kind of funny how that works. There isn't much of a border here. So yeah, like I said, I'm running incredibly late, but on the flip side, I get to come through here during the daytime, which is a little bit nicer. Like it's tough, like it's 2-lane roads and it's pretty straightforward, but there's a couple of turns where, like there's a left I gotta make just before I hit the interstate, and it's always sketchy because trucks can go that way, like it's a truck route, but it's a left turn from a 2-lane road onto a 2-lane road, and there's the line for cars that are in the corner that I'm making, like the cars that are basically coming up to the intersection that I'm turning from. The line isn't set back, so they can come right up to the intersection, at which point I won't fit through the intersection. I had it once. I was in a convoy with a couple of guys, and cars lined up, well, nobody could move, so we all had to get out of our trucks and start getting guys to move and direct traffic, and meanwhile we're getting cursed at, yelled at, guys are refusing. We sit here all day because none of us can back up because there's traffic behind us. He said usually people are smart enough that when they see a truck coming around the corner, they stop and they back up. You get the odd guy that crosses his arms and says nope. I said, well, then I guess we're both sitting here because I can't back up at this point. There's cars behind me. So you either back up or we fucking sit here. So it's kind of like I said, the intersection kind of sucks. This guy's going a lot fucking slower than I'd like to be going. Now again, that's not the worst thing ever. Like I said, I've been through this route 4 times, and it's only really once where it's been a shit show. Every other time it's been okay. I'm worried. It'd be interesting once the actual summer kicks in, because this area becomes like pretty touristy. Because this is Lake Champlain, so it's a big tourist draw for all the Quebecers and Vermonters and New Yorkers. So it might be interesting in the swing of summer, which is conveniently, I think, when we went through and had the actual shit show one time because it was in the middle of summer. Well, we'll see. Like I said, we'll find out when I get to that intersection. I'm still like half an hour away from it, something like that. It's the only downside with the 2-lane road is it's a bit slow, right? Everybody kind of, a lot of people take their time through here anyways, because it's kind of pretty and scenic. Like I quite like the stretch of road. I enjoyed taking this little tour, but it's just all the bullshit to get to it kind of sucks. Like, dealing with Toronto, dealing with Montreal. Well, I don't really deal with Montreal, but dealing with Quebec traffic would be interesting. So I find that people in Quebec, the right lane, the speed limit is 65. Or 62, I should say. For the sake of argument, 60, 65, 60. Let's say 60. The right lane will do 50 to 55. The left lane does about 70. If you're not okay with either of those speeds, you're fucked. Because I am governed at 65, at least my pedal is. Canada requires you to be governed at 65, so I have to at least appear governed at 65. So I can't really, I can't go 70, so people always cram up my ass if I'm in the left lane. But Like I'm at days where I like literally from the time I get to the greater Montreal area to the far side, which is usually like an hour and a half, 2 hours of driving, I don't leave the left lane because everybody in the right lane is doing fucking 45 or 50. It's not heavy traffic. It's just that's everybody. The farther east you get in Canada, the slower people go. You know, to the point where you hit like any of the East Coast provinces or Newfoundland, like people aren't in a rush. And it can be very difficult when you are a person who is in a rush, right? Because they know they don't care. They don't have to care. Why would they? Fuck, you shouldn't be in a rush either. Settle down, right? That's the mindset. It's not a bad mindset to have, but unfortunately, I answer to people that don't share that mindset. So I gotta, you know, I have to go. So it can be frustrating when you're trying to, you know, trying to get something done. And everybody, you know, like this Jeep is an example. Like the speed limit's 55 through here, I think, and this Jeep's doing 45. But again, that usually happens on this road. Everybody does. Okay, the speed limit's 50, he's doing 45. People tend to do like way less than the speed limit through here. There's fucking customs, immigration over there, hiding in the fucking woods. That's the one thing too I find with this border. This border is bad for everybody like being real gung ho on like legal shit. I think part of it is because it's a land crossing. There's no bridge. But usually, like most borders I get to, the customs officials are at the very least cordial, right? If not friendly. This border, the guy didn't say a word to me. Like held his hand out for the paperwork, give him the paperwork, hands it back, and didn't say a word. The second guy, he stuck his hand out. I gave him the paperwork. All he said was okay, and you know, I was good to go. But they didn't today, which I'm surprised by. But usually there's DOT sitting right at the border. They pull every truck in and inspect every Canadian truck. And then you get, just with the last set of curves I was at, there's a, like border patrol. He's sitting there. He'll fucking pull guys over and check to make sure they're legally allowed to be here. And it's like, but you go, you know, whatever it is, like 60, 70, 80 miles west. And cross at where I-81 is. I can't remember where part of that is, what that is. There's nothing. Nobody cares, right? You cross at fucking Thousand Islands, nobody cares. It's this. For some reason, they're real anal on this crossing in New York, and I find it kind of funny. Okay, so where am I here? I'm in this town. I think I keep going straight. Like I got my GPS up, but for some reason, because my phone's turned sideways, it didn't auto flip sideways. My old phone actually thinks it's still right side up, except for the camera. So the video will be fine, the orientation's fine on the video, but everything else's orientation's all fucked. I'm 3.5 kilometers to my left turn, and I think that's the big left turn, so. Like I said, it's really not that far away. But you go through, like, this is like a quaint little town. You know, there's some areas in Pennsylvania I go through. Like the one video I did in Elizabethtown, Pennsylvania. It's the same kind of idea. A nice, quiet little town. Older homes, sloping decks. You know, the usual. But it's nice. It's a nice little kind of scenic area. So it's that's always good. You know, and again, it's American flags everywhere, which, like I said, I mean, as a Canadian who grew up in a country that doesn't boast about their country anywhere near as much, sometimes the pride weirds me out a little bit, but at the same time, I can kind of appreciate that everyone down here is proud enough of their country to fly a flag. Like, I mean, my house has a Canadian, well, no, we don't, we haven't installed it yet. The last house we lived in had a Canadian flag in the front. You know, every house my dad's owned, he's put a Canadian flag in the front. We just haven't gotten around to it yet at the new house. But I think, yeah, I think there's still a little bit too much. Oh, I know where the left is. It's not the tricky left. That's the stop sign, and I'm a little ways away yet. You know, it's more the, like I had a discussion with somebody. I play a sport called Airsoft, so I was in an Airsoft discussion group, and I had a conversation with a guy. And it was about some of the laws and regulations with Airsoft. There's different rules in Canada and the United States. Canada was for the longest time far stricter and is now far more lenient than the U.S., which is kind of interesting. So one of the things is I'm going to the U.S. next week for a game. So I got to bring my airsoft guns across the border. At the federally, airsoft guns or imported and sold into the U.S. must have an orange tip. In Canada, that's not a requirement, so none of my guns have orange tips. However, to bring them to the U.S., I had to get orange tips and put them on. And I commented on it. It's like, the fucking orange tip I bought doesn't fit. It sold me one that was the wrong thread pattern. And everyone was like, what are you, stupid? Like, nobody uses orange tips down here. It's, yeah, I get that. The orange tip is coming right off the second I get in the country. The problem is that to get across the border, I need an orange tip. They're like, well, no, that's only to import. I was like, what do you think I'm doing when I'm bringing in an airsoft gun from another country? I'm importing it, whether it's for sale or not. So I think a lot of Americans aren't aware of how their border works because they've never dealt with their own border, right? So it doesn't matter what I'm doing with the airsoft gun. If I'm bringing something into the United States, I'm importing it, right? Even if it's not for the purpose of sale, it's still being imported. So federally, it's like marijuana, right? There's states like New York State, for example, marijuana is legal, right? Michigan, marijuana is legal. But federally, across the entire United States, it is still technically illegal. So if you were to draw an imaginary circle around the entire U.S. at the borderline, that is the federal jurisdiction, right? Within that, they don't quite pay attention or patrol as much, right? And individual states can create laws. But at federal, like at the border, federal law trumps state law. So I have to have orange tips, right? So I'd made a crack because I'd said, something about, well, I got to get an orange tip to get into communist America. And of course that really, really upset one individual. And, got on to say that America's the greatest country in the world. And I more or less said, check yourself before you wreck yourself. Like, not in a threatening way, but just the country as a whole, right? Because I see it too often now where, I was explaining like the benefits of Canada's like socialized healthcare and stuff. It's like, well, your population's way lower. It's like, yeah, I get that. If you immediately dismiss how every other country does things before actually even seriously considering some of the aspects of what they do and only look at yourself, that's the reason why America as a country and as individuals have a reputation for being unabashed narcissists, right? Most of the world thinks Americans are ignorant pricks, right? And I'm not, I'm not saying that to be a dick. I'm in America right now. I know that's not always the case, right? Actually, well, long stretch, I know that's mostly not the case. But, when the argument thrown at me is, well, we're the greatest country in the world, so, our laws are what the fuck was the argument? Because it was the orange tip thing. It's like, we have the greatest country in the world, at least I can buy real guns. It's like, I can buy real guns, right? That's not the argument here. The argument was that the point I brought up was that I had to source an orange tip and go out and buy something that everyone immediately removes off their airsoft gun to come into the States with. And nobody can understand that I'm not coming to the game and playing the game with an orange tip. I'm getting across the border and then putting all of my metal tips back onto the guns I brought. You know what I mean? Like, it's not I don't know how to explain it. I'm not trying to, I know that in the U.S. nobody uses orange tips. But at the border, if they decide they want to inspect my airsoft, they better have orange tips on them or they will seize them and or turn me away. So, it's I got to make sure I do it right. And even if, like, for some reason they don't care, well, it's better to be safe than sorry, right? I'd rather them tell me you don't actually need the orange tips, don't worry about it next time, than have them say, you're not going anywhere with these, congratulations, you get a lifetime ban, and you're not getting these guns back, right? Because you didn't put orange tips on them. Well, one of those is far more preferable to experience than the other, right? So, but yeah, like if the U.S. needs to look at other things that work for other countries and see how they can implement them into themselves. Because again, if all you look at is in the mirror, and you don't look at anybody else objectively or anything else objectively and try to kind of glean improvements from that, you are always going to be a narcissist, because you're going to look at yourself as perfection, which, again, especially on the internet, Americans are really bad for. Again, not so much in real life, but on the internet. And I've met some guys down here that are like gung-ho, America's the greatest thing ever, God loves America, nobody else, and yada yada yada, right? And that's usually kind of the spiel is, well, you know, I've got God on my side, so I can do and say whatever I want because it's right. It's like, well, that's not how that works either. That's the same concept as fucking extremist Islam that everybody fucking hates. But it's still there's still a lot of learning that America and Americans have to do. Gone are the days where the U.S. was the innovators and was the bravest and the strongest and the ones that put in, a large amount of the work. Because the U.S. kind of started getting fat on itself, like, war movies and things like, Saving Private Ryan was always a good one. Like, the beaches at Normandy, Omaha Beach was a bad one. The Utah beach that the Canadians went after was worse by a long shot. But again, there's a lot of Americans that will say, well, if it wasn't for us, you guys would have lost World War II. It's like, no, we were fighting World War II just fine, right? Well, we had the hardest struggle in D-Days. No, you didn't. Just we didn't choose to sit there and make fucking action films about it. And don't get me wrong, I love Saving Private Ryan. That's an awesome movie. I've only watched it once in my life, and I really should get it again. And I'm not trying to diminish the sacrifices of soldiers that did those things. It's just, it seems like a lot of Americans diminish the sacrifices of everyone that's not American in those conflicts, right? Most action movies always glorify the hero. And again, you look at action movies from other countries, it's the same thing. Right? I always laughed at it's that fucking African film, fucking Who Killed Captain Alex? And it's like, they're terrible. They're horrible actors. They're fake. Like, the props in a country that has more AKs than fucking people, none of them could find real fucking firearms, or even ones that looked real. But it was like all about how great the fucking Ugandan commandos are and stuff, and how they were kicking all the bad guys' asses. And it's like, holy fuck. None of that is really how things play out, right? And it's, it's the same kind of mentality that like groups like ISIS and stuff have used to recruit and to try to brainwash its own people. Look at these ISIS special, there was that fucking video where ISIS released like their version of special forces, and it was guys, they had them swimming through water and pulling guys off like docks and doing all these mock stealth kills and shit. And like, I think they had a real U.S. Navy SEAL watch the video, and he basically just laughed and facepalmed through the whole thing. Like, it was terrible, right? But it's a similar idea, right? It's always glorifying the good guys, and the bad guys aren't real people. And that's usually how the military works anyways. You try to dehumanize the enemy so that you're not sitting there constantly reflecting on what you just did. And I get that in the military. That makes sense. There would be a lot more trauma, I think, if you didn't just, reduce them to Jerry's or Sammy's or Skinny's or, Haji's or any of those kinds of subhuman analogies or anagrams for them. Like, but when it comes to movies, like, one I think did a really good job was Black Hawk Down. It did a pretty good job of portraying some scenes from the African side of things and kind of showing them as being not all just, we want their money, we want their drugs, we want their diamonds, we know their way. Like, they weren't just bad guys for the sake of being mean and nasty. There were people who were confused, people who lost loved ones to the Americans and weren't involved in the conflict and took up arms against them. Like, and I've read the novelization of Black Hawk Down too, which goes into more detail. But that movie and book do a good job of kind of humanizing the enemy a little bit more than a lot of other movies do. And obviously action movies that's the point. They're dumb fun, and I get that. But there's the argument the Americans never lost a war. Well, that's not true. To win a war of attrition at the very least, or a war of territory or ground, winner has to take more territorial ground than the other. Vietnam was a good one. The U.S. left Vietnam, right? And it was effectively a loss. The U.S. lost its manifest destiny war with Canada. But again, like I've got a friend who's American. Well, the U.S. has never lost a war. It's like, well, yes, they have. Well, no, we did this. And there's always an excuse, or well, we actually did this. Instead, we let you have that, or it's always kind of a begrudging, like I let you win kind of thing. And it's like, no, again, if Americans, or like especially the education system, were to say, this is where we fucked up, you'll have far less people growing up saying we're the best, we can't do anything wrong, so whatever I do is right. Because that's the problem. Is it's not that you want to glorify the U.S. as fuck ups or anything. It's just, if you grow up believing that everything you do is right, you're going to believe that everything you do is right. So anything you do can be right, and therefore that's justification to do whatever you want, good or bad, right? Where if you look at past mistakes and learn from them, that's how you become a better person, and therefore, like, by extension, a better country. I want to watch Black Hawk Down now. It's such a good fucking movie. So again, I'm not trying to shit can this particular individual, because he's a good guy. I was irked by his greatest country in the world comment. He was irked because I said, well, you're one of those guys, right? And implied he's one of those guys who believes America is the greatest country in the world and nobody else is anywhere near as good. I said, well, Canada was ranked this year as #1 for quality of life in the world, right? Well, that's certainly America. I don't even think placed in the top 10. So, and then I usually get, well, you can't trust that source, you can't trust that source, but you can trust my source. Well, your source is the same source as my source. It's a news outlet, right? It's never. Arguing with people based on information that you hear from people who are arguing with other people is never going to be any more than exactly what I just said, right? Secondhand information from somebody that, wherever they got that information, just used it to prove someone else wrong. It's not that it's just a factual statement that, hey, like, we went out and did this research because we wanted to. We went out and did this research because we wanted to prove you wrong, right? It's like the flat Earth theory, right? And it's a fundamental concept of science that you do not start a scientific theory with the end goal and attempt to prove that end goal, right? Like the flat Earth theory. The idea was that as like scientists, like an actual scientific way of thought, you would not say, I believe the Earth is flat and this is how I'm going to prove it. It's I believe that the Earth is not round. I'm going to run tests to see if I can determine what shape it actually is and draw your conclusions from there. Right? But when you've already started with an end goal, it's like a palm reader. You're always going to find things that work or coincide with your preconceived notion. So, when the guy took a level up on an airplane and the level didn't dip, he's like, that's proof the Earth is flat. And it's like, well, no. That's proof that the plane stays centered along gravity, because gravity pulls towards effectively the center of the Earth, and therefore, as long as you're rotating around it kind of at the same distance, or basically the plane is maintaining the same altitude above ground, it's maintaining the same level of what's we're looking for here, pitch with regards to gravity. But when you go out and say, well, the Earth is flat, and again, you can immediately find all kinds of things to prove your statement that are not necessarily correct. Okay, it says I gotta make a left up here soon. I think I do. Yes, I do. There's another left, and then I think another left, and then probably another left. And apparently I'm coming into a really, really slow area here. Let's see what we got. Well, it's definitely not a really slow area here. It just looks like normal fucking traffic. But it's up around the curve, past the Valero. I make a left, and then I carry on until I make my next left, and then I make a right onto the interstate. A lot of left turns. Be prepared to stop. Well, that's fucking outstanding. The construction is straight ahead and not to the left. So this intersection's not particularly sketchy. It just looks smaller than it is. I think that car hauler got around there, no problem. Yeah, like I said, I'm not trying to shit can the U.S. or shit can people who live in the U.S. or anything like that. It's just sometimes you have to look outside yourself to be able to improve yourself, right? That's really all it comes down to. I wanted to run this video for longer because I wanted to run into town here, but I don't know how much more time this video would give me, because it's usually kind of hit or miss as far as how much this video will actually let me record. But if you go, I just don't want to come to a complete stop and have to drop it here. I just like having my foot crossed over behind me. I don't want to have to fucking put my foot on the clutch. You still got the slow paddle up, so that's a happy looking construction worker. I don't think I've ever seen a construction worker look that happy. Fucking miserable. But that's good. I'm happy for him. Ah, yeah, the left is coming right up here anyways. So I gotta go up here. I kind of jerk left around a parking lot. And then I make basically the next major left where this fucking big truck's coming from here. It's kind of a weird setup. You're going around a corner or on a curve because the road just kind of dead ends into a parking lot sort of thing. And then up here where this Irving truck stop is where I gotta make a left. So it can usually be a bit of a sketch fest, like where that truck's making a left. Like they've got it pulled out to the right here, so it's not so bad. Like I said, I think we're gonna be okay today. Somebody tries to scoop me. This car and but you'll see there's a pickup here. He stopped, which is good of him, because otherwise if he'd gone right up to the line I would have fucking taken his hood out. But yeah, so that was basically it. So now I carry on until I get to the interstate, and then get on the interstate for I thought it was like 3 exits or something like that, and then get off on the road, turn left, turn right, there I am. And then find out if they'll unload me. And I gotta find out, this place apparently, everybody swears up and down that this place, they do everything. Yet the one time I've been there, I did the work, like I pumped. This trailer is an old oil trailer, or not even, this is an old hazmat trailer. I wouldn't be surprised if the pump does not work on this trailer. So if I have to unload, I'm in for a shitty day because I'm gonna have to fucking figure this trailer out, get everything connected, and then run the pump. And again, if the pump works fine, that's not a huge deal, but it's just gonna be fucking frustrating. You know, kind of looking forward to getting there, basically to the park where they tell me to park and relaxing for a couple hours until they're done. But beggars can't be choosers, you know. I'm not always gonna get what I want. We'll see how this goes. We'll find out when I get there. But since I'm getting on the boring old interstate up here, I'll call it a done video and focus on driving, maybe listen to some music, relax, do all that nonsense, and go my 2 exits. Just I also want to make sure that I get off at the right exit. The wrong one will be a no truck route. The right one's plenty okay. So I figure I better also know where it is I'm going to end up. Again, it's pretty straightforward. I get off the highway, make a right, down to the road dead ends, make a left. I think it's 2 lights or 2 intersections up, make a right, and then I'm there. But you never know sometimes, so I'd rather not fuck it all up. It's alright, have fun, kids, make good choices and all that.